You ever found yourself giving up in an argument when you think that the only way to move past this is either to bludgeon your way through till the other person sees your point of view or just to give in and move on and have some peace? I found myself in that dynamic so much, and I found a game-changing mindset that I'm going to share with you today. It's called the both and mindset. Let's dive in. My name is Dr. Gregory Donahue, and this is Zen for Men. Men's mental health put into action. Real, practical change. So let's talk about where this mindset comes from. I still viewed conflict as this idea that one of us wins, one of us gets to have a perspective, and the other one was proven to be wrong. It makes sense logically. I used to think of conflict as one person is clearly wrong and the other person's clearly right, and the only objective in conflict is for the right person to get their point of view across, to where the other person goes, you know what? You were right all along. I was wrong. Let's just be happy together forever. And the number of times that happened is pretty much zero. For me, it was because I am what they call a verbal processor. A verbal processor just means that I tend to make more sense of what I'm thinking and feeling the more I talk about something. When my wife would hear the first rough draft of what I was saying, it was usually missing some things as I was still trying to think it out. I was still trying to figure out what I was trying to think, say, or feel. Whatever I attacked at the beginning, such as, oh, why didn't you do this? Or, why don't you make the bed more often? Or I feel like I'm having to do this too of it. I would pick a topic, but it was never about that. It was about something deeper, but I needed to talk it through. So when she would try to problem solve the thing that I brought up, I would just feel frustrated. I would just say, you know what, never mind, I shouldn't have brought it up. And then I'd be frustrated. But as I started to get more healthy and tried to become stronger in my conflict skills, one of the first mistakes I made was thinking that I need to win this argument, or I need her to see it from my point of view in order for it to be a success. It wasn't until I found out about this principle of both and versus either or. Now, if y'all have ever heard of transactional relationships, this is kind of the sum of that. Transactional relationships are all about there's a limited amount of resources and I need to give so much, and then I expect you to give so much. And if I give less, I should expect you to give less. It's this fairness theme. Biggest problem with the transactional relationship is that each person values their own action differently than the other person. So when you try to exchange all this amazing work that I did over here, the other person gives me this much for it. And to them, it's only worth that much. So suddenly I feel like I'm busting my ass and they feel like, no, it's really not doing that much for them. They feel like they're giving everything they can. Transactions don't work. What ends up working is that both people have valid emotions. Both people deserve to have feelings, and there needs to be a consistent conversation around how do we make this work for both of us? And it takes a ton of work. Honestly, transactional relationships are simpler, which is why big corporations and getting a paycheck for work we do is how we do most of our other relationships. Transactional relationships work, except with intimacy, except with romantic relationships. When we're thinking about romantic relationships, I had to change up my entire rule set to focus on the both and principle rather than either or. And it had to do a lot with my family members as well. So the both and works in more of a family kind of a setting. So with my kids, all of that. So I want you to think about some of the conflicts that you've been in lately. I want you to think about the closest person in your life, whether you're single or whether you're with a significant other, closest family members. I want you to think about, is there an instinct within me to feel like it either has to be their emotions or mine? That I'm trying to convince someone of a certain perspective? Does it feel like a power struggle in the argument? And if it does, that means that you have entered into the either or category. Now, one reframe that's really important with the both and category is the assumption that both people's emotions are valid to them. If I have an emotional opinion, I could be wrong about aspects of it, whether it's about the trash or chores, whether it's about sex or money. The specific issue that I'm bringing up has a deeper undertone. No matter what a couple or any family members start arguing about, there is a deeper core emotional truth that's valid. And if you go in assuming that, it becomes more of an exploration, more like a dig site, trying to figure out, okay, obviously I don't understand what you're getting at. Help me understand. That mentality of assuming both of us are valid, why do we feel like this is not connecting? Let's dig deeper is an essential mind shift. There was some work done by Susan David. She talked about emotional agility. She found out that the rigid mindset of things need to be this way and this way only leads to a ton of emotional suffering. Whereas with emotional agility, any kind of flexibility we can have to searching through and talking through emotions and trying to be open minded has a way better impact on our resilience through all life stressors. It's okay to have mixed emotions. It's okay to not know how you feel or to not understand. There doesn't need to be resolution, but there does need to be a decision that I am going to go into this with emotional agility. I'm going to go into this with a both and we're going to treat this like an active dig site for archaeology until we figure out what's actually under the surface for you, for me, or for both. A side note on that for me, I had a lot of trauma about feeling like I needed to put the other person's emotions first. So when my wife would bring an emotional issue forward, and especially if she was already heated or if it was something that I already viewed as legitimate, which is she was sick or she was genuinely angry about something I did, I had a hard time knowing what I was feeling. I had a really hard time doing both for myself. I would just say, you know what, you're right. I don't know why I did that. And then there would be this blank space. Some of the time I had to get space by myself and to process through meditation, journaling, definitely through talking to other people that didn't trigger that emotional wounding. And then I would bring that insight back to her. There was so much processing that I was not able to do at first in front of my significant other because she was triggering those old fear points for me. So let's talk about specific strategies of how to do the both and live in a conversation. I remember a lot of times when my wife caught me in a lie, I would feel the shame, but I would also feel a ton of anger. And so I would tell myself, oh, I shouldn't feel angry. I should feel ashamed. And so I would present that, but then I would never express the anger. So instead, I've tried to say, you know what? I feel angry and defensive and ashamed at the same time. I allowed myself for a broader range. Y'all ever see the movie Inside Out, where they talked about blending of emotions as a part of maturity? This is something I wasn't taught very well when I was younger, and so I'm catching up on it now, where it's okay to have mixed emotions. It's okay to feel multiple ways. I tended to leave off whatever emotion I thought was going to get a bad response, but that is part of the truth. That's part of who I am. And so if I leave off whatever I think is going to have a negative response, I never get clarity on it. And then the other person thinks that I only feel this way, which isn't true. So using the word and is I feel this emotion and this emotion is one way that I use both. Also using yes, as soon as my wife would tell me an emotion, or as soon as I would express something that was painful, I would say yes. I would validate it. It doesn't have to be the word yes, but validate that. Be like, I can understand that, or that makes sense. Instead of but, I would say, and this is also true. So if I'm feeling particularly negative about a situation, I could say, you know what? I feel really defeated, like we're never going to get past this. And I know that I'm not going to stop trying. I feel both of these ways. Or you could say, I know you're frustrated with me. And I feel terrible and shut down and defensive about this. Use and instead of but. It's about combining. It's like, hey, here's where we're at. Let's work on it. And is a powerful, powerful word. Another easy rule that I want you to really hone in on is pause before you react. I was so bad at this. I'm getting better at this, but I am historically so bad at this. I will either respond with an easy, yes, you know what, I'll work on that. I want the conversation to end because I'm so uncomfortable. I'm ashamed because they called me out on me forgetting something or me doing something that I shouldn't have been doing, and I just want it to end. So I'll just say, yes, you know what, I'm going to work on that. And the reality is, I don't want to work on it. I feel another way about it. I already feel overwhelmed and stressed. I don't want to take on something more. I want her to understand that the reason I forgot to do that was because I have too many other things on my plate and I'm really stressed right now. I do feel bad that I forgot to do that. And I'm realizing I'm really stressed and I haven't done a good job expressing that to you. The last shift is the idea of what do we both need right now? Immediately assumes that you're on the same page and insinuates connection. The language itself can help our brains craft a future. So what do we both need right now is a question that can get us both thinking about we are both important. The question immediately crafts this future that is connecting rather than tug of war. So a big one for my wife and I, a real life example is she constantly has this trigger point where she doesn't feel cared for. She feels if I don't do something or if I don't follow up, she says, you don't care about how I feel. When she says that, I immediately become defensive. And that's normally where I start with. Be like, I do care how you feel. What I do instead now is I say, you know what? I can imagine and I can understand that you don't feel cared for. I say, I know that I care for you. And I want to know more about why what I'm doing is affecting you that way and how we can do this differently. I want you to understand what I've been going through lately that might paint this picture a little differently. It takes practice, y'all. Even when I just said that, my instinct was to want to say, but. It's so instinctive in what we do because it's this self-protective mechanism. And a lot of times we had to use that in other relationships in our lives. So if you're trying to craft a new positive direction in your life, it's okay. Acknowledge that you have other relationships that may not have been safe, or maybe even the one you're in isn't currently safe. So call that out. That's part of the both and scenario. And if the other person doesn't give space for that, call them out on being either or focused rather than both and keep on reinforcing it. If you model it, eventually it can bridge the gap or push the other person away. Both is probably healthier than sticking with the either or mentality. The both and mentality is not going to be natural for most of us. So I want you to take your time with it. Try it out. Go through the examples that I said. Think about the examples of the fights and the conflict in your life and see how it might translate. Type into ChatGPT, how do I take on a both and approach when talking to my wife? Get detailed with ChatGPT about the specific argument. Be looking for what is underneath that. If there's not enough space in the relationship to talk it through, be looking to ChatGPT to say, what are the emotions fueling my conflict? Why am I getting defensive? If you don't know where you're in conflict and what your style is, see where you get transactional, see where you get defensive and map that out. You have to identify what you're in conflict about first before you can try to bring in a both and mentality to it. Then try to notice in conflict how often you use either or mentalities or where to use that language. See how much you can inject both and into the situation instead of but, instead of or. Test yourself on the language you use and also look for it in your partner. If this has been helpful for you, I hope that you will subscribe to our content and give some feedback so that we can give more of what you're looking for. As always, if you need more consistent help, go on Psychology Today, find a therapist, or if you live in the state of Texas, we offer telehealth, so you can reach out to us at thecouchpsychology.com. I hope that this helps you bridge a connection with yourself and with the people that you care about. Until next time.